Hi guys, and welcome to www.bartoldbiomechanics.com. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about athletic footwear this morning and give you some clues on what to look for, what to expect, and maybe some ideas on how you can prescribe athletic footwear properly for your client. So athletic footwear these days has become quite complex, and in the last few years you may be aware there's been a lot of discussion about making shoes a lot more flexible, a lot lower to the ground, in a nutshell a lot simpler. And I think that's probably a very good trend because historically the products have become quite complicated. This is a really good example though of a technical running shoe. So what you're seeing in this sort of product is a shoe that's been built desiring a combination of both stability and also cushioning. So you can see that there is quite a large amount of cushioning under the heel. A lot of different shoe companies have different proprietary product to help with cushioning. It's important, especially if you're a heel striker. There is a lot of discussion on that, but 90% of all people still strike with their heel, so I think it's still an important component of the shoe. Also in the forefoot, obviously when you take off, there's a very high impact peak when you take off, so we do need some cushioning under the forefoot, and that's all got to be combined in a way that keeps the shoe stable. Some of the techniques that are employed by athletic footwear companies to improve stability, they have what we'd call link componentry, so you can see this is quite a rigid plastic piece in the mid part of the shoe. It simply links the rear part of the shoe to the fore part of the shoe, and it means that the shoe has some integrity in terms of how much it can rotate. For somebody who's looking for stability in their shoe, especially if you're an overpronator, this is actually quite an important component. Some other things here, you can see that this particular shoe has what we'd describe almost as an exoskeleton around the heel here. So traditionally we have what's called a heel counter. It's a solid piece of polyurethane that cups the heel. This is a technique where the heel counter is put on the shoe externally. There are pieces cut away within this shoe, and the idea here is to reduce weight. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. This is a very good system, I like it. It still maintains nice integrity of the shoe. It means the shoe it flows nicely together, it holds the upper together quite nicely. I think this is a very nice system. Some other techniques that might be used to try to make the shoe a little bit more stable are to use different density midsoles. So this particular shoe has a more dense material on the medial side or the inside of the shoe than it does on the lateral side of the shoe. That can be quite important because it helps to slow down pronation as you strike the ground. However, there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is that it makes the shoe heavy. Now, if I were asked what are the three most important things about running footwear, I'd say it's lightweight, lightweight, and lightweight. So weight is incredibly important. We strive to choose the lightest possible shoe we can for the runner, and that's a real take-home message for you. So just try to make sure that you look for the features you want for your particular athlete, but try to put it in the lightest weight product you possibly can. In terms of testing for a shoe, I see a lot of people doing different things. They look at flexibility of the forefoot, so they're looking to see where the shoe bends. Now there's really only one place where the shoe should bend, and that's where your foot bends, which is at the level of the big toe joint. So when you test the shoe, a hand on the rear foot, a hand on the forefoot, bend the shoe, and it should only bend through this area. I see a lot of people getting a shoe, and they get the shoe and they bend it right through the middle. Your foot doesn't do that, so if you do that to the shoe, I can promise you that you've broken the shoe and it will never be the same, so please don't do that. Also, you can look for integrity of the heel counter. I think that we're going to see some very new designs in product in the future, and in fact the heel counter may even go away. I know that's a bit argumentative, but I personally am not that convinced that it's a very necessary feature in a shoe. I want to talk briefly about shoe wear. There's a lot of discussion about shoe wear, and you see wear patterns on the outside of the shoe. Is it very important? How much can you tell? My message would be you've got to be cautious about this. A lot of people look at shoes that have skived off the lateral side and they say, well, obviously that means you're striking a particular way. It doesn't necessarily mean that, so you've got to be very, very cautious. Obviously, if a shoe is distorted, in other words, if the shoe is rolling in or rolling out after several months' wear, well then there's an issue with the way that athlete's running, and that needs to be analysed from a biomechanical perspective. One of the little tricks that can tell you something is if you have one shoe that's doing something or has a particular wear pattern and the other shoe has a different wear pattern, I'd be thinking about a limb length difference for that athlete. So it's quite likely where you see a very big difference from one shoe to the other, that you might be dealing with somebody who has one limb that's shorter than the other, or longer, depending on which way you look at it. Okay, what does the future hold for us? There's been a lot of discussion about minimalism. There's been a lot of discussion about drop. Just very quickly, drop is the gradient of the shoe. In other words, it's the differential between the amount of material under the heel to the material underneath the forefoot. A traditional drop is about 10 millimeters, so in this shoe it's about 22 millimeters in the rear foot and 12 millimeters in the forefoot. We do have shoes now that are zero drop, in other words 0 millimeters in the rear foot and 0 millimeters in the forefoot, and some shoes have no midsole at all. Now you do have to be a little bit careful. I'm not saying at all don't wear that sort of product, but you do have to be careful, and there is what's called a transition period that's required to get into that sort of shoe. The reason for that is it makes a radical difference to the loading patterns. It increases loading in some areas, it decreases in other areas, but the worst thing you can do is make that transition very suddenly. The recommendation is probably 12 weeks plus to make the transition between what we'd call a traditional shoe like this to something with zero drop. Be very, very cautious. There's also some discussion about barefoot running. I think barefoot running as the mainstream, in other words, the only way you run, I really don't think that has a lot of evidence behind it. Barefoot running is a part of a balanced training program, I think is really quite sensible. You can do it as a mix-up tool, you can do some drills on a safe surface like grass, and I think that can benefit every runner in terms of getting them to understand their gait patterns a bit better. So I think there's some of the new trends that we're looking at. At the end of the day, the take-home message here is, I think it's very important to mix up your training. So make sure that you don't wear the same shoe all the time. Make sure you don't run on the same surface all the time. Make sure you don't run on the same terrain all the time. So try to get on some trail, try to get on some dirt. Don't just do the same circuit that you do every day on the road. That's destined for a failure and potentially an injury. There's no right or wrong answer for every athlete. It's an individual choice, so at the end of the day, get good advice. Make sure that you see somebody who is very well versed in the area of biomechanics and sports medicine. Get that advice, get online, get onto www.bartolbiomechanics.com and get some fantastic information. Most of all, go out and run and enjoy it.